There was a time when flying didn't just mean getting from point A to point B, it meant something more, something personal, almost magical. The jet that defined that feeling for an entire generation wasn't the biggest or the fastest, but it was the one that showed up everywhere, served everyone, and left behind the kind of legacy that doesn't fade. The Boeing 727 wasn't just a plane, it was the plane. And for millions of people, it was their very first real introduction to jet-powered travel. The sound alone is unforgettable, a deep, roaring growl that built up like a storm behind the airport terminal. That sound didn't just mean a flight was taking off, it meant you were about to go somewhere exciting, whether it was across the country or just a few cities away. You could hear it before you saw it. And when it appeared, with that sleek T-tail, 3 engines tucked neatly in the rear, and a profile that looked ready to sprint, you knew you were looking at something different. What made the 727 so unique wasn't just how it looked or sounded, it was how it fit into smaller airports, onto shorter runways, into the lives of travelers who weren't always flying out of major hubs. The design wasn't a happy accident either. Boeing had to answer to not 1, not 2, but 3 major airlines, all asking for different things. United Airlines needed something that could climb quickly out of high-altitude airports like Denver. American Airlines wanted something efficient, a twin-engine option. Eastern Airlines had routes over water and needed a 3rd engine for safety. The result was a trijet compromise that ended up defining an era, and it worked better than anyone could have imagined. The 727 became the great equalizer in jet travel, bringing major league performance to hometown airports. It didn't just visit big terminals, it brought jet noise to sleepy corners of the country. No jet bridges, no problem. The 727 could roll up, drop its own stair, and start boarding in minutes. People could hear it before they saw it, that unmistakable growl of its JT engines echoing down quiet runways. For airports with limited infrastructure, it was a game changer. It opened the jet age to places that had never seen one before. Families could now fly out for weddings, vacations, reunions, and do it in a jet that felt just as sleek and powerful as anything from JFK or LAX. For many flight crews, it was their first real jet assignment, a chance to earn their stripes on something that demanded respect. This wasn't a fully automated system. This was raw aviation. And passengers? They noticed. They felt the rumble, the sharp pitch change during takeoff, the thrill of a fast climb. There was a rugged beauty to the whole experience. In a time when airline travel still felt exciting, the 727 made it accessible and memorable. Its ability to turn regional routes into headline services gave smaller cities a seat at the table. This wasn't just about engineering, it was about connecting communities. Whether flying to Florida beaches, Colorado ski towns, or Midwest business hubs, the 727 became the bridge between here and there. For Boeing, it became a lesson in how compromise can lead to innovation. Each requirement from those 3 airlines might have seemed contradictory at first, but the final product wasn't a middle ground jet. It was a masterpiece of adaptability. And that's why it earned a spot in aviation history, not just as a successful design, but as a cultural icon. 3 engines, all at the back, 1 on each side, and a middle one fed through a clever S-shaped duct that ran up the tail. It was unconventional, bold, and incredibly effective. That middle engine gave engineers headaches at first, though. Early designs had airflow issues, which risked performance and reliability. But instead of backing down or starting over, engineers added vortex generators, small tweaks that smoothed out the flow and solved the problem. That kind of hands-on, problem-solving mentality was everywhere in the 727. It was designed to get the job done no matter where it was, and it did it with confidence. One of its most beloved features had nothing to do with how it flew and everything to do with how it welcomed passengers: the rear air stair. Built right into the fuselage, it opened downward like a little drawbridge. No waiting on ground equipment, no airport fuss. Just a simple walk up into the cabin or down onto the tarmac when the flight was over. It gave smaller airports without jetways a way to connect to the jet age. And it felt personal. Stepping up those stairs made every flight feel like an event. There was something almost cinematic about it, like boarding your own private aircraft. Even if you were in seat 23B, parents would hold their kids' hands and point up at the engines while the ramp agents loaded bags just feet away. Pilots could give a nod or a wave as you climbed aboard. It wasn't hidden behind glass doors or jetways. It was right there, real and mechanical and alive. You heard the hydraulic hiss as the stairs unfolded and the solid clunk as they locked into place. And when the flight landed, the process reversed with the same graceful simplicity. Even when the weather was bad, even when the tarmac was steaming or snow-covered, there was something charming about stepping off that rear stair. It was more than just function, it was character. For frequent flyers, it became a familiar ritual. For first-timers, it felt like something out of a movie. The view from the top, looking over the wing and down the line of windows, was pure nostalgia. It made flying feel intimate, not industrial. And in small airports especially, it made a world of difference. No long hallways, no crowded gates, just you, your carry-on, and that staircase leading to adventure. It was a piece of clever engineering that solved a problem but ended up adding personality. Flight crews loved it too because it gave them independence and speed. No waiting for ground crews to catch up. You could open the door, lower the stair, and start the turnaround. Simple, efficient, timeless. Even now, decades later, people still talk about that stair. It's the kind of detail that sticks with you. Not because it was flashy, but because it was human. It made every journey feel just a little more special. And in a world where air travel keeps getting more sterile and streamlined, that rear stair stands as a reminder of when flying had charm. And charm came standard. It wasn't just convenient, it was versatile. The 727 could land on runways as short as 4,800 feet thanks to its advanced high-lift devices. These weren't just flaps and slats, they were carefully designed to allow the aircraft to take off and land where other jets simply couldn't. That opened up hundreds of routes that previously belonged to turboprops or older piston aircraft. Suddenly, jet travel wasn't just for big cities or major hubs, it was for everywhere. Small towns, beach destinations, mountain airports. The 727 became a regular sight all over the country and the world. Airlines loved it, and so did pilots. It had that analog feel, real dials, real switches, real feedback in the controls. You had to fly it, not just manage systems. That made it a favorite among crews, who appreciated the way it responded in the air. Three-person cockpits gave the flight engineer a critical role, managing systems, monitoring performance, and acting as an extra set of expert eyes. It was a time when teamwork in the cockpit was a must, and this aircraft brought that culture to life. Every takeoff felt like a coordinated ballet. The captain, first officer, and engineer each had a rhythm. Checklists called out loud, knobs turned with precision, eyes constantly scanning the gauges. There was no autopilot doing the heavy lifting on short hops. Pilots flew. They trimmed the controls manually, managed the climb, adjusted power settings, and watched every little detail. That tactile connection made the aircraft feel more like a living machine than a flying computer. Crews would describe it as honest. If you treated it right, it rewarded you. The feedback through the yoke, the sound of the engines spooling up behind you, the slight vibrations through the floor, all of it gave you a sense of presence. Nothing was hidden behind layers of automation. Pilots knew the systems inside and out. Flight engineers had to be sharp, constantly adjusting fuel flow, electrical loads, and pressurization. Everyone had a job to do, and the success of the flight depended on how well they worked as a unit. It wasn't just skill, it was communication, and that forged tight bonds between crew members. It also shaped generations of aviators. Many of today's senior captains learned their craft on the 727, building habits that stuck with them forever. Even the sound in the cockpit had its own character. The whir of fans, the click of switches, the steady hum of analog systems all around you. Flying it was a challenge, but a rewarding one. It kept you engaged from gate to gate. And when you landed it smoothly, you felt like you earned it. Instructors loved it for training because it didn't hide mistakes. It taught them. It gave real-time feedback. And that made it a flying classroom as much as a workhorse. Every knob, every lever, every indicator had a purpose. No screens, no touchpads, just muscle memory and awareness. It was raw aviation. Crews didn't just operate the 727, they bonded with it. And in return, it became one of the most respected aircraft of its time, not just for its performance, but for the deep connection it formed with those who flew it. Over 1,800 of them rolled off the production line between 1963 and 1984. That's an incredible number, especially for a plane of its size and era. It actually held the record for the most produced commercial jetliner until the Boeing 737 eventually took the crown. And even as newer models arrived, many airlines held onto their 727s well into the 1990s and even early 2000s. It just worked. It's hard to explain to someone who never flew on one what it felt like. The sound was louder, sure. Those JT engines weren't quiet by any means, but that sound was part of the magic. The climb was strong, the acceleration pushed you back in your seat. The cabin was tighter than today's widebodies, with a single aisle and a 3-3 seating layout. but it felt solid. The overhead bins clunked with authority. The windows had a particular shape that brought in golden sunlight just right, and when that rear stair opened at the end of the flight, it felt like stepping out of a real adventure. It wasn't without its challenges, of course. The noise became an issue as newer regulations came in. Stage 2 jets like the 727 simply couldn't meet rising environmental standards without modification. Retrofitting was possible, hush kits were developed, and companies like FedEx invested heavily in them, but it wasn't cheap, and it didn't solve every issue. The fuel burn was higher than newer jets, the engines were reliable but old school, and the 3-crew cockpit, while beloved, didn't fit into a world obsessed with cutting costs and streamlining operations. Still, the love never faded. Even as airlines phased them out, many found second lives in cargo roles, where noise wasn't as much of a concern. Others went to military operators, government agencies, and even private charters. Oil spill response teams used them. One was converted into a flying zero-gravity simulator. Some kept flying in remote parts of the world where simplicity and durability still mattered more than noise levels or onboard Wi-Fi. It's almost hard to believe now, but in the 70s and 80s, the 727 was everywhere. American, United, Delta, Eastern, Northwest all had big fleets. At its peak, it was the backbone of domestic air travel in the US. It handled short hops, cross-country treks, and everything in between. And for many people, it was the very first jet they ever set foot on. The golden era began to fade in the 2000s. Fuel costs soared. Maintenance demands grew. Newer, quieter, more efficient jets took over. Delta retired its last 727 in April 2003. Northwest followed in June of the same year. Others quietly followed suit. As of November 2024, only a handful remain in commercial service, with operators like Aerosuka and USA Jet keeping a few flying. And of course, there's one now on permanent display at the Museum of Flight in Seattle, the very first 727 ever built, preserved like the legend it is. There's a reason this aircraft still stirs emotion. It wasn't the fastest or most luxurious, but it had soul. It felt alive. It was built during a time when airplanes were designed with character, not algorithms, when form followed function, but function allowed for flair. Today's aircraft are better in almost every measurable way. Quieter, cheaper to run, more efficient, more automated, but none of them make the heart race quite like the 727 did. Modern jets don't have rear stairs. They don't roar like a lion when they taxi out. They don't demand 3 skilled people up front working in unison. And they certainly don't fill up small-town airports with the feeling that something powerful just arrived. That era is gone. It ended quietly, one retirement ceremony at a time. But for those who remember, the Boeing 727 isn't just a plane from the past. It's a symbol of when flying was more than just travel. It was theater, it was pride, it was connection, and it was loud. It was the kind of machine that couldn't be built today, not because we lack the ability, but because we lack the will. The priorities have shifted. Cost, efficiency, emissions, all important, all necessary, but none of them make you glance out the window when a plane lifts off the runway. None of them make a 10-year-old race to the fence at the end of the airport just to watch it roar into the sky. The 727 did that, and even now, decades after its prime, it still does. In memories, in stories, and in the lucky few that still fly. That's why we'll never build anything like it again. Thanks for watching. If the Boeing 727 was part of your memories, your childhood, your travels, drop a comment below. Share your story, and if you're just discovering it for the first time, take a moment to look it up, listen to the sound, and imagine what it felt like to board one for the very first time. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories that take flight, only here on this channel.